Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning into today's Smiley Talks, where we're going to be tackling the very serious issue of knife crime and gang violence in the UK today. And this obviously fits within our remit of UN goals of creating peace, justice, and strong institutions. My name's Matt. I'm the VP of Global Partnerships at Smiley, and I'm representing Smiley Movement, which is a non-for-profit community interest company sponsored by Smiley. And we use this as a good news platform to champion positive change in the world and help to make the world a happier place. Today, we're going to be having a live discussion, so I'd encourage you all to get your questions in for the Q&A session at the end of the show today, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can in the end. So, as we all know, knife crime is really a huge growing problem in the UK today. We saw over 46,000 victims struck by a knife or sharp object in the year that ended March 2022. And what we want to do is try and get to the bottom of why it is such a widespread issue today and what we can do to make positive change to try and end knife crime and the terrible impact it's having on communities throughout the countries. We're really immensely proud to welcome three fantastic panelists from a very wide-ranging background that we're going to talk to today. We'll be talking to Jerry Robinson, who's an educator based in Northeast London and is at the heart of the community that is of communities that are impacted by these problems we have. We've also got Soraya Mia, who's one of the lead organisers from Take Back the Power. And we're also joined by Sefton Henry, who's actually a former gang member turned advisor to a number of organisations such as Gangs Line, and he's a consultant at Unity on the subject. So welcome today, and we're going to take this opportunity to introduce each of the panelists themselves. So, Jerry, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you undertake with Haringey Learning Partnership to tackle knife crime?
Hi, so as Matt said, my name is Jerry Robinson and I'm Executive Head Teacher of Haringey Learning Partnership. And Haringey Learning Partnership is a network of alternative provision schools in Haringey, which is in the north of London. So our students come to us for a variety of reasons, but they're not accessing mainstream school. And that could be because they're unwell or there are other complex issues which mean they can't be, or it could be that they've been permanently excluded from school. Or in some cases, it's a short-term intervention to try and get them back into their mainstream school so that they can be successful. So we work with a broad range of students from primary level up to secondary across the borough of Haringey. And yet, unfortunately, as Matt said, we are in a community which is impacted by knife crime.
Thanks very much, Jerry. And I mean, that's such important work you're undertaking there. So we'll look forward to learning more about that and how we can impact on those local communities in the future. Soraya, be great if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about the work Take Back the Power are working on and how that is tackling solutions to youth violence in the UK today.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and I'm a young person from Camden and I Take Back the Power. I've actually been on the receiving end of crime and youth violence, and we at Take Back the Power believe that youth violence is a product of where our society is right now, and society's response to youth violence usually makes the problem worse by increasing exclusion and mistrust. And we know that everyone has a backstory and a different reason for being involved, and no stories are the same. So I'm here to represent another 8 lead organisers, and we just mainly promote social justice and bringing about change in the criminal justice system.
Great. Fantastic, thanks, Soraya. And last but by no means least, Sefton, you've got a very interesting backstory of your own relating to this problem. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and the work you're doing today with Gangs Line to fight knife crime?
Hi everyone, my name's Sefton. I'm a former gang member. I've spent nearly 11 years in prison. I've been shot at, I've been stabbed in my lip, I've been stabbed in my ear, and I've been bricked and bottled in my head. I've spent a lot of time in prison and gangs. Like, I lived a very crazy life. I was on drugs for a long time. The elders, they would give me drugs and tell me to go and take it to this man down the road. I was only 8 at the time and I didn't know what I was doing. And my life just spiraled out of control. I now work for a company called Gangs Line. We go into schools and prisons up and down the country. I also am the founder of Unity myself, and I now travel to America into some of the prisons over there. So I've really got an insight into this problem, actually being involved in it, being a perpetrator, and then also being a victim. So yeah, that's me.
Well, I mean, you know, it's so relevant to the topic, and you know, we want to discuss the problems that we're facing today, and you know, there seems to be lots of talk about the problems we face, but not enough focus on the solutions to get to the root cause of this. So, what I wanted to ask you is, how bad actually is the problem of knife crime and gang violence in the UK? How much has that grown in recent years? And have you got any sort of stats or figures compared to other offences today? So I would probably aim that question at anyone who feels best placed to answer it from within the panel. Jerry, maybe, or Soraya?
I mean, yeah, I'm happy to say, I mean, you gave a figure at the start, Matt, around the number of knife offences in the UK in 2020.
Yeah.
And I mean, I work in London, and particularly in Haringey in North London. And I think the figures for London are pretty hard hitting. I think that there were 13,627 knife crime offences in London in 2020. But I think the most heartbreaking figure is that 24 children aged 17 or under were murdered with a knife or a sharp object. And I think we have seen an increase in knife crime. And I think the figure that I saw was that since 2014, there's been an 84% increase in knife crime up to the year 2019-20, where the last stats are. So yes, in terms of statistics, it does appear that the problem's getting worse. And I think what we're also seeing is that children are being more affected by the problem.
And how does that growth in the criminality compare to other sort of areas of offending? Is it that we're seeing a growth in crime generally, or is it that knife crime is growing exponentially compared to other offences?
Yeah, knife crime particularly seems to be growing. I think, I mean, the figures for the pandemic, so since kind of we were hit by COVID-19, we've seen an overall drop in crime nationally, 19% reduction in crime overall. But at the same time, knife crime is at its 10-year highest peak. So yeah, we are seeing knife crime increasing in a rate that other crime isn't increasing.
Yeah. So on to the next question, sort of from that, is what do you see as the main source of this problem? And I feel like this one should go to Sefton, maybe, who's been at the source of the problem himself.
Okay, I feel like one of the sources that has been for me personally growing up has been more to do with emotional trauma. Emotionally traumatized from some of the things that I witnessed myself. Growing up in an area where, you know, beating someone up was the norm. That's how you deal with a situation. Being groomed into the lifestyle, I also believe it's the culture now. Like, you know, you go into McDonald's and you listen to certain music that they're playing, and it's telling you to sell drugs, or it's talking about stabbing somebody. And now mums, they let their children also listen to it. So we're literally groomed into it now. I think back in my day, it was more to do with trauma that you may have faced at home and so on. But now it's becoming culture.
Yeah.
When I was out on the streets, I used to rob people. That was something that I did. I had an IPP, that's a life license. They could keep you in prison for over 100 years. And robberies, you get 3 strikes and you're out. And my thing was robbing, because I slept on kitchen floors. I didn't have no food. I was out on the streets. I needed to make money. And that's what I used to do. And then I would see certain people and I'd think, you know, I would never really go to what I would call the innocence. And what do I mean by that? I would look and I'd see and I'd be like, all right, cool. He's an innocent. She's an innocent. I'm going to leave them alone. But this one I'm going to get because he looks like me. And I'm not just talking about color. I'm talking about the dress code. I'm talking about the wordplay. I'm talking about his culture. He comes from the same background as me. He's trying to be bad, or he thinks he's bad. So then I will get him. But
Yeah.
now everyone's wearing the same clothes. Everyone's speaking like that. Everyone's looking like that. And it's not necessarily that they are that, but they're now groomed into the culture. So now I think that's the biggest problem we have.
So it's almost territorial, Sefton, to a certain extent. It's almost a lifestyle that's been glamorized by the way it's played out in popular culture, through music, through film, through the general lifestyle. And then there's a territorial element where if you see someone that is, you know, stepping into your area and you know, you feel like it represents a threat, or
well, yeah, that plays a part as well. Within the structure of the whole gang affiliation and stuff like that, that if you come into my ends, then obviously we're going to get it cracking. But I don't feel that that's the key to it all. I feel like, how can I put it? You see, when you kind of been brought up in a certain way, it becomes your lifestyle. It becomes natural to you to react in that way. So there's not that many gangs per se. People glamorize it to be like it's a gangs thing, but I think it's a vulnerable children's thing. I don't see it as gangs. So when I'm seated with these young men, I don't see that. But obviously, for someone that's not lived in that culture, straight away, you're gonna see it as that. So can I give you something? And I'll just say that, you know, there's been so much good that has come through it. In the sense of, I know I have a twist in this, the integration of different nationalities coming together and becoming one. I took part in the riots in 2011 and went to prison for it. And if you saw the way that we came together as one through that, and these are those young men, the young kids that are out on the street, we're talking 13, 14-year-olds, kids. So what happened is there was a lot, some of the good signs is that there's been integration where a white person and a black person sees each other as blood. An Indian and a Kosovan sees each other as blood. So there's like a family that's in it. I don't know if you know about the Peaky Blinders. In this country, we've had gangs for hundreds of years, and I believe that gangs are formed from some sort of injustice or deprivation or class, should I say, class struggles. If I was rich, I wouldn't need to rob. I'll give you another twist, and I'll say to you, if I steal a country, I'm a statesman, but if I steal something from the shop, I'm a thief. So this is just coming from someone that's a former gang member, that through our eyes and how we see it, there is definitely gangs and so on, but I believe that there's an underlying issue that most people are not facing it, and it's one growing with no love, you know, living in a loveless society. There was something that who was it? I can't remember, but they done this test about the UK, and they said that we live in a loveless society. We go to build a business before loving our own kids, and it's not because we don't love them, but we're too busy trying to make a life or a business or something for our kids that they end up getting neglected.
Very, very good point.
We spend more time at work than with our kids, you see, and then they are being parented by YouTube and PlayStation and GTA and Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty. These are all violent things. So for me personally, I see that as a bigger problem, and I think if we can tackle that, we will see a big change.
Well, we're going to come on to solutions soon, but thank you so much. That was really super interesting. And Soraya, it appears that the problem's got worse over the last 10 years of knife crime in the UK. Do you think that's the case, and why do you think it is?
I mean, 10 years ago, I was only 8 years old, but I have definitely seen growing up, especially with my peer group and growing up in North London, it has been really different. Knife crime is obviously so prevalent now. And actually, just to echo something that Sefton mentioned, just about how it's so internalized in our community. And I mean, I've grown up with it, so it's almost become normalized and like second nature if I hear about crime. And it's really sad to think that underlying issues such as feeling of unsafe and security can sometimes lead to people carrying weapons as a source of protection. I definitely find a lot of my peers resorted to that crime due to that factor, and I think over the last 10 years it definitely has been an increase. The statistics show, but I think the stories that we hear from young people, especially with youth services funding being cut and young people being left to be on the street and fend for themselves and resorting to protection, I think that could also be an underlying issue as to why it's increased over the last 10 years.
And do you think obviously police numbers have gone down over the last decade? Do you think that there's any correlation in the physical presence on the street would be a deterrent, or do you think that now we're in a society where the establishment doesn't have that impact that it did, let's say, 10, 15 years ago? Jerry, maybe. Or Sefton, actually. Jerry or Sefton. Sorry, Sefton, you're on mute. Sorry.
Hi. Who's going? Is it Sefton or me?
So at Gangsline, we also train government staff, and I've come into contact with the mayor's office and the police in 2015. I was doing the MOPAC training for the police, and we was training them on understanding gangs at Gangsline and giving them an understanding on the other side of the fence of what's going on, because as we can see, this problem is growing and it's not being tackled in those, in those ways of, how can I put it, Sefton carrying a gun it's not that you've got to deal with the gun, you've got to deal with Sefton, because I'm going to find something else to pick up. If you take out the knives, someone's going to find something, you know. But I do believe that police on the beat have been taken away, and that's caused a massive rise as well. Because I know if I'm on the estate and I'm seeing police officers right there, I'm not going to stab anybody. It's that simple. So I think they need to bring that back.
Yeah. And Jerry, what did you think? You had some.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Sorry, for me, yeah, it's not about an increase in policing. And it's a personal view. I think that part of this issue, as Sefton spoke about, is lots of kind of toxic environments, relationships that lack love and nurture. And I think rather than criminalizing young people and investing in more of that criminalization, we need to invest that funding and that money in positive experiences, in love, in nurture, in building relationships. And that is, I think, for me, a huge investment is needed in youth services. I mean, we've had a real term cut of 70% to youth services in the last decade. And I think that's had a big impact. I think in some areas, some boroughs in the UK, kind of Luton, Slough, Medway, those cuts have been so severe that youth services have been completely lost their funding. So we've got this rising demand, this rising need for positive engagement, raising aspirations, finding nurture, meaningful relationships, but we've got fewer resources to do so. So rather than kind of divert that funding towards the police, I'd rather divert that funding towards youth services and real investment in our young people, because I think otherwise we've got a recipe for disaster.
Soraya, did you had something to say on the subject?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to add in, I completely agree with the funding aspect, and also I've actually been working on a recent project looking at policing and youth justice, and the effect that that's had on Black and ethnic minority young people. And some of what came out of that conversation was that young people, the relationship is pretty evident with police, that it's quite strained, and that young people often find themselves that they can't turn to support for police. But I think that's something that a lot of young people are really empowered to actually strengthen that relationship. Granted, it will come with a lot of willpower and a lot of change, but I think that would also be a step forward.
Yeah, very interesting from all of you. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. Jerry, there seems to be a lot of misconception around knife crime today. What is that, and why do you think that is?
I mean, I think it comes down to lots of different things. I mean, I think we've touched upon it here, that the root cause of the increase in knife crime is austerity and poverty, and alongside that, lots of trauma and the impact of trauma on young people. And I think we have lots of common misconceptions. And I think Sefton touched on it when he talked about kind of the glamorization of gang culture and knife crime, and references to drill music or computer games or all of those things. And I think they are misconceptions. And there's a real misconception that those young people who are caught up in knife crime are criminals who don't value people's lives. And that isn't the truth. You know, they're children, vulnerable children who've often experienced trauma and are often being criminally exploited. And I think that's the common misconception. We have to get away from the moral panic and headlines and actually look at these individuals as young people, as children, and get to the root cause of what's going on for them and how we can support them. Similarly, I think there is a misconception around race, and that all of those young people and children involved in knife crime are young Black boys. You know, that isn't the case. And I think we have to look at each individual and see them as the vulnerable child that they are, who's often been exploited.
So it's a need for more empathy from society towards these people and families that can avoid these misconceptions. Only sort of serve to feed the problem rather than find the solution, which is being more empathetic and tolerant of other people. And that's a societal problem we face with most of the problems we have in society.
Yeah, and an acknowledgement of the reason that we're here, that, the bigger system issue, the structural issues, the fact that, in London, 37% of children are living in relative poverty. That's at the root cause of this, and that's what we have to see. These young people are victims. They may be committing crime, but they are victims of circumstance, and well, not even circumstance really, because it's caused by a bigger society issue.
Sefton and Soraya, do you have any thoughts on the misconceptions around knife crime? No. No. Okay, we shall move on to the next point, which comes from that, which is what is the, we know that there's almost an untangible impact on communities from knife crime today. And how do you think, again, maybe going to Jerry on this one, how do you think that it impacts the wider community, these issues?
I mean, there's a huge impact on communities, and I think, again, Sefton already touched on many of these points, but I think we have to acknowledge the massive grief and trauma caused by knife crime. And I think, I just look to my local area, to Haringey, and the young people and the families and the communities who have been impacted by knife crime and what that's meant for them. The sense of pain and anger, and also the fact that sometimes it can end up that we build a very hostile environment, and young people can feel, rejected, that they're unheard, that they're not part of the community, seen as kind of angry young people with nothing to contribute. And I think that can have a massive and really damaging impact on our communities. And I think we have to now invest in our communities, hear their voices. Soraya's project is really inspiring to me. Let's hear from the young people. Let's make them agents of change in their own lives, because they are the best placed people to really do something about this.
Wonderful, Jerry. Really interesting. And Soraya, is it just to lead on from what Jerry had said there? How are you finding you can impact, what the work you're doing has a positive impact on those communities to combat these problems?
So also as how I also work Camden's Youth Spending Service as a peer advocate, so bridging the gap between the adults and professionals and the young people who use the service. And I think just by having a role like that in place in communities, like not only are you an advocate for young people, disadvantaged youth that may not actually have their voice heard, I'm able to amplify the voice and opinions and concerns of young people, and kind of carry on and pursue what I believe is correct in promoting positive social justice and bringing about the change, especially with the youth funding being cut, and volunteering for youth services.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. And do you think these issues, it's very interesting because during the pandemic, obviously, we've spent a lot of time stuck at home. So as Jerry said earlier, that crime has generally kind of waned a little bit, dropped, the numbers have dropped. But you were saying before, Jerry, that you've still seen a surge in knife crime throughout the pandemic. Sorry, Jerry, you're on mute. Oh, sorry, Jerry.
Sorry. It is the case, yeah, that overall the latest figures are a 19% reduction in crime, but as I said, knife crime is at a 10-year high. And I think certainly in London, we have seen in recent months, actually in the last couple of months, a real increase in knife crime and young people and children who have been tragically victims of knife crime, including in Haringey. And I think we have to put alongside that, the fact that for lots of families who were already living in poverty, as I said, 37% of children in London are living in relative poverty, already living in poverty, now impacted by a global pandemic. Parents and carers who may have been on 0 hours contract, who've completely lost work, no regular income. I mean, we run a food bank at Haringey Learning Partnership, and we've seen a huge increase in the number of families that are dependent on that support. So poverty's increased. In lots of cases, young people haven't been in school, haven't been meaningfully engaged during the day, you know, after school activities haven't been happening. All of those things have an impact. I think safeguarding has been much harder for schools and other services during the pandemic. Without those regular check-ins and points, sometimes the early intervention hasn't happened. So I think the pandemic has inevitably made the situation worse and harder to deal with and harder to address. And that's why, for example, in alternative provision, where I am at the minute, we continued to be open throughout the pandemic. Unfortunately, our young people were really engaged and were in school every day. But I know that's not the case for all provisions across the country.
Excellent. So we've looked a lot at the terrible problems we face, and now what would be interesting is to explore. And I know we've touched on a few of these things already. We've actually touched on quite a few of the key pillars to the solution. But what do you think, Sefton, is from your perspective? How do you think we can solve or manage the problem of this growing issue of knife crime?
Okay, so I don't feel that we'll be able to eliminate it altogether, but I do believe that we could make a massive impact or a massive shift, even in history itself, because we've seen some big things that have happened over this time. And I would say to empower the right people to do the jobs. If I start to see certain people in power, in places that are authoritative, and you know, if I start to see people that were like me that are making it, you know, there's many people that are positive role models, and we don't see enough of it. What we always hear of is the bad things that young people are doing and not the good things. I really truly believe, coming from where I've come from, I've seen a lot of things that are inferior and superior. So I've always felt inferior, always felt below, always felt outcasted, always felt to be kind of, he needs help. It's always needing help. And I feel that we need to put the power back into some people's hands and make them CEOs, make them prime ministers, make them, because something that I say is that I don't want to have to go to someone and ask for help. I want to be able to help myself. I want to be in a position where I can help myself. So I think that's a wider look at things. If I started to see more people like myself in places of power, I would then be more likely to say, hey, actually, I can actually make it in this world. Because I'll just break this down quickly. In our world, and I'm just saying in the gangs world, in gangs world, it's, you know, I sell drugs, but in this world, you need to get a job. In the gangs world, they have, you know, 3-4 girlfriends. In this world, they say to get married, have one. In the gangs world, they speak with slang. In this world, they tell you to speak properly. In the gangs world, you act wild. In this world, they tell you to act normally. So it's a literal, it's like rebellion against something here. It's like a rebellion against the system. And for that gang member to choose to go into this world over here, there has to be something worthy for me to step over into that. Because over here I'm making money and I'm doing my thing. So why should I go over here? But if I see someone like myself that will make it, because we've seen the discrimination or the racism, you know, if you're, you know, big, like fat, you're probably not going to get that job with the business man. He wants like a slim lady. You know, there's different discriminations and racisms in society that causes us not to be able to thrive and get to that place where we want to get to. So we'll end up making that way, doing something bad like selling drugs. So I think in a bigger scale, if we start to promote people that are doing good, I think in the long run, it will change the trajectory of how things are going.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point. And I think that, you know, well, we all know that social justice and equality are two real key pillars to making the world a more positive place for the future. Did you have any thoughts on solutions, Soraya, from your perspective and the work you do?
Yeah, I know. I actually really wanted to echo a lot of what Stefan mentioned, just about the contrast with the gang life and the world that we live in now, and what makes us give up the gang life to kind of revert back to the normal life, away from crime. And what I kind of always constantly speak about is just giving opportunities for young people. I mean, as a lot of speakers have mentioned today, one of the underlying issues can be poverty and austerity. And I think if you actually give opportunities for young people to make legitimate money and receive qualifications and work their way up the ladder in employment, they're more likely to leave the world of crime because they have something to look forward to. And I mean, if they're not offered that opportunity, then how can you expect them to do so? And also at Take Back the Power, we kind of really empower and ask for emotional amnesty, and that young people are given the space to talk to people who get it and understand them without fear or punishment. And just to give an example, we actually have a resource called the Power Circle, which is an anonymous group of people that get together where we unload trauma and anything that kind of acts as a burden on us, relating to crime, not relating to crime. And that just gives us a space to kind of get out of any concerns that we have, to listen to other young people with lived experiences, to youth violences, as experts in their own lives.
Yeah. And Jerry, what would you say from your community aspect is the top priority at the moment in this to tackle knife crime? I mean, it sounds like there's such deeply embedded societal issues that we need to challenge. But obviously, that, you know, those are so deeply embedded in the way we live that might take some time. So, can you see any sort of short-term, quick goals to tackle the problem?
I mean, yeah, as you said, Matt, it is such a complex social problem that, you know, but that doesn't mean that we should say, okay, it's too big a problem, it's going to take too many years, we're not going to be able to address it. I think that as a starting point, we have to counteract the moral panic. We have to look beyond the headlines. We have to see children as individuals and individuals within part of a wider community. I think the public health approach, like the one that's been taken in Scotland and has had massive impact in Glasgow, is really important. So those partnerships between children's services, the police, schools, housing. But I think, you know, I said it earlier, but the importance of creating positive and nurturing environments. We know that austerity is one of the causes of knife crime, arguably the main cause. If we could invest in youth services, take young people away from what they see as hostile or toxic environments and refill communities with positive services and activities, I think that would make a massive difference. We've talked about empowering young people, and I think we have to see our children as part of the solution, not the problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry, it's very interesting because obviously we're living in a changing world, and governments are becoming slower and slower to act. And it almost looks, from my perspective, like business is trying to tackle these bigger societal issues because they know that, you know, we have to change and we have to, you know, to solve knife crime and to solve the environmental issues and the deep issues we face for the future. This will take a massive change in mindset. But what do you think that there's a role that business can play as a conduit to tackling problems, to creating solutions, to helping empower communities?
Yeah, invest funding for youth services, create opportunities, sponsor organizations to run projects for young people. have roles in your organizations and businesses that can be filled by young people who can contribute hugely to change. I think there's absolutely a role that business can play. And I think that it's a key part of this. It's, yes, we're talking about government and the need for change at a government level, but on a private business level, where there is money, there's sponsorship, there's job opportunities, the difference that could be made is massive.
Yeah, and are there opportunities within your 3 organisations for businesses to get involved to help facilitate this change needed?
Yeah, absolutely. Offering opportunities, work experience, role models coming in to speak to our young people. Funding is always helpful to run projects and enrichment opportunities. But I think as well, not seeing an us and them, that business is separate to us. Our young people, our schools, we're part of the community. This is about working together. It's not an us and them, and an us and them will just reinforce the problem. But let's work together as a community to see how we can change things.
Sefton.
Yeah. So we are looking to build youth clubs, and we're starting one in Erith, in the borough of Erith. Then we want to move them into London, in our Unity project. So we would love any support that anyone can give. Also, I feel that, with the businesses, a lot of these young men are entrepreneurs. They have so much skills within them, and if you can invest in them and take them under your wing, like me personally, like you heard my story of being to prison 7 times, being shot at, and so on. Someone took the time to listen to me. Now I'm on a team with international human rights at the Commonwealth United Nations. I'm traveling, going into prisons in America, going into prisons in England. The future king, he even came to see me, and like, it's been amazing, So I think investing in the young people would do wonders, taking a young person under your wing and mentoring them, each one teach one, and don't be afraid either. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to them, because they're just kids, But yeah.
Sarai, is there anything to add from your side?
Yeah, I was actually just going to jump in and add. I think our team are, the power of 8 lead organisers. We're all young people, and I mean, I'm a young person who's been through the criminal justice system, through the social service system, and I think that speaks for itself, in that charities as such can really empower young people. And like, this opportunity I wouldn't have been given otherwise. I wouldn't have been able to voice everything that I've got to say, coming from my peers also. So it's just these opportunities that young people can have such powerful roles in organisations, and actually be able to network with others is really important.
So, I mean, I hope that we can, for us, it's really important to shine a light on the great work your 3 organisations do, and ways in which we can help promote the need to get involved, because as it appears that, with most of the problems we face in society today, it's up to us to get in and actually do something about it to make change. So hopefully the more education we give, and the more amplification of your own causes we can give, that will help. Are there any other projects that you know of that tackles knife crime that you'd like to talk about here and shine the light on, again, other organisations that are doing really positive work to tackle these problems?
I mean, it's not an organisation as such, but I think that the work of the violence reduction units in the UK has had a really important impact. And I referred to Scotland earlier because I think that's the one where we've seen, the most impact in a relatively short period of time, where Glasgow was the murder capital of Europe, and now the number of homicides in Glasgow is at an all-time low. And it's that impact of working in partnership, seeing young people, as individuals, but within a wider network, and thinking about how police, schools, the NHS, organisations can work together to support those young people. And I think their slogan, kind of catchphrase, which I think is a really important one, is to remember that violence is preventable and not inevitable, and that there is work that we can do when we join together to really reduce the likelihood of a young person getting involved in knife crime.
Very interesting. So, so if you could, what do you think? Where do you see this problem going, evolving over the next year? Do you see us getting a lid on it at all, or do you still see it further spiraling out of control? Knife crime. Sefton.
So yeah, I do feel that we're still gonna have this problem. It's still gonna be here, but as everyone's speaking about it and coming together, I do believe that there is solutions, and if we could, I don't know, I would say doing like a collective thing, when all the organizations and different people do cross-border meetings and bring it all together, I think that would make a massive impact, because I've noticed that there are people over there doing things, there's people over there doing things, and there's people over there, but they're not coming together as one. And I think the more we talk and do things like this, the more we come together as one. And that's the point of unity. When we come together as one, we'll be more powerful in the approach that we want to see.
So it's a need for more collaboration between community organisations, charities, the police, and the people themselves. So, and do you see that starting to happen at all, or is that one of the challenges we need to overcome?
So personally, I've seen it within myself. I've seen many people reach out to me, albeit housing. I'm now doing some work with them. As I said, we're trying to build youth clubs and get them stated around London and so on. So I'm seeing a lot of different people really wanting to get involved and wanting to reach out. And I think that's the key. But sadly, and sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but sadly, there are a lot of organizations that are just looking out to get something for themselves. And it's not so much to do with the actual change that we want to see. So I always say people before profit. So it's not so much that I'm out here trying to make a profit. I'm actually trying to make that change. And I've just believed that there are people out there that really got this heart to actually see the change. And if they come together, if we all can just come together as one, I think we'll make a massive impact.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of, the issue of knife crime is on the agenda. I mean, it's something we talk about, and actually maybe the fact that it's on the agenda in a negative way kind of feeds the problem. But I mean, I've seen, for instance, my local football club in London have renamed their stadium the Kian Prince Foundation to raise awareness of this problem. Do you see that happening more and more? Do you see organisations, community groups really trying to put a positive spin on this and put it on the agenda?
I think the fact is that we see. I think that the collaboration is really important, and I absolutely agree with Sefton. But I think, like you talk about the football stadium being renamed or the headlines in the papers, is what we're talking about is young people who tragically have been the victims of knife crime. So we're talking about things that have happened after the event. And what we have to do is shift our focus, and we have to look at the prevention. Yes, we need to support young people who have been victims and who are in the system and have been excluded from school or have been, criminalized or in the youth justice system. But we also need to really target our activity towards the prevention, the early intervention, and like I said before, investing in communities to stop the problem from happening rather than dealing with the tragic aftermath.
Yeah. So I guess, that's the problem again with all of the problems in society today. It's a case of early intervention and supporting children, creating those stable sorry, Sefton.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I also see that, you know, we have a lot of talking, and we talk and we talk and we do conferences and we do that. And I've been to so many conferences, I've spoken so many different places, and I've heard great things, but we have to have a call to action. There has to be a call to action. I feel that we need to figure out something that has a poll, and it's like everyone opts into it, and we do whatever it takes to get that thing done in that thing. I always say, if 1 billion people put £1 on the table, that's £1 billion. That, you know, it's so
No, it's
simple.
amazing. It's amazing.
So simple, you know. So I think there has to be a call to action when we do come together as well.
So just going back to early interventions, Sefton, what do you think? Do you think an early intervention could have changed the course of your own life?
100%, I agree with that.
And what sort of intervention do you think could have benefited you personally as a young person?
Well, truthfully, my situation may be different than others, but me personally, I was groomed to sell drugs at the age of 8. So my situation would probably be more to do with intervention within my mum and my dad, and helping them to be able to help me. But with others, it may be a little bit different. But I would say more education and understanding for the young people to differentiate what's right and wrong. And I mean, like I said before, society has pictured things in a certain way that the kids don't know that it's wrong, because, you know, I know it's small, but you open your paper and you see page 3, you know, like you see cars, and then there's this naked woman holding a sign, walking. Are we buying the car, or are we buying the woman? Like, what's going on? It's a warped thing that we're showing the young kids, because remember, when you're a kid, you take in, it's a sponge, and you just absorb it. So on one side you're saying no, but in society it's saying yes. So I think education for the young people, we go into schools in Gangsline, and we even go to primary, and I mean, I think the youngest we did was around 8 or 9. I think 8, I think it was, and we was doing a gangs workshop with 8-year-olds. So I would say prevention, yeah, definitely.
Soraya, was there anything for you to add? We're gonna move on to some questions from the audience, but I just thought, have you got any final comments before we wrap this stage up?
I think my personal kind of demand for systemic change would come from changing their narrative about young people who are involved in youth violence, and to recognise that they are people with complex needs, and the support that they are entitled to, they're just not receiving. So I think in order to bridge the gap that we've got with the violence and criminal justice and crime on the streets today, we need to be able to support our young people to stop the criminalisation.
Okay, so I'm going to thank you very much, all three of you. That was really interesting stuff. I really hope that I'm empowered to go this afternoon and look at all of your 3 websites and see if there's anything I can personally do to help and to be agents of change. And I hope all of those tuning in will take the opportunity to do so themselves, because we won't tackle these problems until we actually physically all engage with them and try and do something ourselves. And as Sefton said, it's the scale of all of us that we can offer that can make a difference in the world today. So if we come to a couple of questions, this is an open question to any of the 3 speakers. What's the single most important thing we can all do to support the fight against violence and knife crime in the UK? Anyone fancy that one? Or do we feel that we've covered that one?
I think we've covered it, but I think for me it is about looking beyond the headlines and stereotypes, and seeing children as children who quite often are victims of criminal exploitation, as Sefton was as an 8-year-old. It's, you know, it's changing the way we look at the issue. You know, even now you can look on Twitter or social media or whenever there's a headline about knife crime, and you will read some of the comments about, you know, just lock people just need to be locked away, and the answer is increasing criminalization. And I think we just have to look at the problem differently and think about those children as individuals.
Yeah, and we're facing some significant challenges over the year because of this pandemic, that we're going to see more unemployment, we're going to see more austerity potentially because we've accrued so much debt through the pandemic. And is there anything that you think, what do you think your next steps are individually as organisations to tackle these real problems that we're going to face over the next 12 months? Open that one to Mary again.
Yeah, for us at Haringey Learning Partnership, there's been a lot of work this academic year to really change perceptions of young people who've been permanently excluded from school. You know, when I started in this role back in September, I remember a young person saying to me that the sense that he felt was that he was rejected, that he'd been cast out from the community, that nobody cared about him. And I think we've done a lot of work to change that. And it is about, you know, our community recognising that all of our young people, including those who've been permanently excluded from school, are valuable, that they have something to offer, and their voice actually can make a significant difference. So for us, we will continue doing that work to really become a community-facing school, part of our community, not just you know, something that's done too, but something that, you know, where our young people are active agents of change and really making a difference within their community.
Soraya, what's next for you guys?
I think personally, professionally, as a team, I think as Sefton mentioned, raising awareness is really important, having these discussions. But I think now we've all come to a point where we've had some conferences and have had so many conversations. We really want to see this actually being implemented into society and bring about actual change. So as we mentioned earlier about unity and actually having these conversations with powerful authoritative powers, we're actually enabled to actually bring this change into our communities.
Thanks for it. And finally, Sefton, what's next for you, sir?
So personally, for me, I am being deliberate in spreading love. Like, I really am going to spread love to everyone that I meet. That's my plan, my main goal. But other than that, it's just, like I said, the youth clubs, I really want to get them up and running. I want to go into the streets where these young people are. I have like mentors, there'll be unity mentors that will actually go onto estates and really connect with these young people and be where they're at. And also we do have another scheme where we're building a site where, you know, you can bring the young people in and they'll get to see a prison and what it would be like and stuff like that. So we've got a lot of plans ahead that we are hoping to finish.
So I think we should end this with a sort of note of optimism, because we've discussed a very difficult subject that has gone on for too long. The problems with knife crime have got worse and worse. But for us, for me, I do feel that we've got a new generation of kids coming through that care more, that are more empathetic, that are more cause-driven, and that they really do believe in trying to realign social justice issues and equality, gender equality issues. I'm very optimistic that despite the challenges we face, that we're going to have a better future with the next generation coming through that are much more in tune with the world than necessarily my generation was. Does anyone have any views on the next generation and their impact? Soraya, as someone from the next generation.
I mean, I think being a part of the criminal justice system and actually having gone through a social service system, I'm actually training to be a social worker right now. So that's kind of my step moving forward, and I'm really hoping that the next generation, we can provide as much support and actually see everything that we want being implemented into our societies, and then to have them take up the opportunities that we might have missed. And yeah, just everyone, exactly as Stefan mentioned earlier, everyone feels love and we all can trust each other and know who to turn to for support.
What a fantastic note to end this this fantastic discussion today. And I want to take this opportunity to really thank Jerry, Soraya and Sefton for joining our Smiley Talks this afternoon. And I really hope that all the viewers will find time to check out their individual organisations and charities and do support them, because these charities, whilst it's very nice that you go and look at their website, they actually want your money, your support, because that is what will make a change for the future. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Smiley Talks.